Welcome to Armchair Expert, Experts on Expert. I'm Dax Shepard. Hello, Monica Padman.
Hello, Dax Shepard.
You're in a stunning orange, toe-to-head
Pangaya.
And
my nails match.
yeah, orange is your color. I know purple's your color, but orange, boy, does it make the skin pop, pop, pop.
Thank you.
Now, listen, upon popular request, we were urged to have a religious person on to,
share a different side.
Yes, because often I'm spewing my atheistic,
take on things,
nihilistic, terrible view of life.
Well,
and there's no one there to rebuttal about what the Christians feel like. So we were urged to find someone, and Nadia was suggested to us.
Yeah.
And by George, do we love her.
Yeah, she was awesome.
Nadia Bolz-Weber is a 3 times New York Times best-selling author, a Lutheran minister, and public theologian. She is an ordained Lutheran pastor, founder of House for All Sinners and Saints in Denver, Colorado. Her books are Shameless, A Sexual Reformation, Accidental Saints, Finding God in All the Wrong People, and Pastrix, The Cranky, Beautiful Faith of a Sinner and a Saint. Nadia's podcast is called The Confessional, and it features ugly confessions from beautiful people. She is all kinds of fun, and we love talking to her.
It was a very cool conversation, so different than our normal ones.
It really was. It was fantastic. So please enjoy Nadia Bolz-Weber.
He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert.
First of all, I just want to thank you for doing our podcast.
I think you mentioned on one of the episodes you wanted to talk to someone in religion, and then a shit ton of people tagged me on Instagram and they're like, talk to Nadia.
Yeah.
People who are not religious, I'm their religion person.
Yeah.
like
You're the
that.
anti-religion religious
Yeah,
person.
exactly. But I'm very proud of my atheist readership. That's my shiny little trophy.
Yeah, I'm going to quote some of the stuff I saw you speak on in learning about you that is incredibly profound and transcends all that stuff. But it really came about because I'm an outspoken atheist. Lots of our listeners are religious, and many of them have said, it'd be cool if eventually when you said that shit, someone had a response, which I totally agreed with. So I guess I just want to declare to you what my intention is.
Sure.
Which is, I'm not the type of atheist that wants anyone to stop believing in God. Monica and I have a couple of really close friends that I can see Jesus in their life. I'm not denying it. I can see that for them, it's really, really cool. If I have a single ulterior motive, it's really just to find out how you navigate certain areas of it that would be very hard for me to navigate.
For sure. That sounds fun.
Okay, great.
And also, I equally am not the kind of Christian who people want to come to me and explain why they don't go to church. And I'm like, oh God, I'm so sorry. I don't care. I don't have a dog in that fight at all.
You don't get a year-end bonus with more people signed up.
Exactly.
Membership.
Even when I was a parish pastor, I found it interesting what people believed in my parish, but I didn't feel responsible for what they believed.
Right.
At all. What you believe has to do with a million things I have nothing to do with.
Well, I thought maybe we could start with what I interpret as similarities between you and I, in that we're both scumbag addict alcoholics, yeah?
Correct, yes. Yes. Yeah.
And I think that could make us closer than anything could make two people close,
yeah,
right?
no, I'm definitely a garbage person. Yeah.
You're 28 years sober this year?
Yeah.
Wow,
Oh my
congratulations.
God, that is so impressive.
Between my boyfriend and I think we have, I'm not so great at the math, but he also has, I think he has 29 years.
29 years. Okay, so that is,
Isn't that
that's
crazy?
57 cumulative years.
Fast
Isn't that
math. Great
nuts?
job.
You'd think we'd be more mature. If you do the math, you're like, wow, you're in the 5th dimension, right? And I'm like, no, still a garbage person. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I guess I try to explain to people it has fixed nothing. My first thought is still, when my daughter's crying, fucking A, I got to get up. And I got to step over all my shittiness. And then I get to the point where I go stand up and go look. And then I do it. But that's all. It taught me to stand up and go look. It didn't keep me from being a self-centered idiot.
Yeah, well, my friend said we really suffer from a disease called first thought wrong.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I might go further and go first, second, third thought wrong for me. I'm like progressive. It's like, I'll go half.
Exactly.
Oh, there's the right answer.
Well, I mean, even after all that program, sobriety, therapy, I do Enneagram. I don't know if you're into that personality stuff. Even after all that, my first reaction to almost everything is fuck you. Now, I almost never stay there, but I pretty much always start there. But the time that elapses between starting there and going somewhere and responding from a different place is shorter.
Yes.
But I didn't get a personality transplant. I'm still have the same wiring, you know.
We interviewed Bill Gates on Tuesday.
He always warms up for me.
Prior to going in to talk to him, I had to have like a real long lecture with myself, which is like, this is not your opportunity to try to prove to him you're smart and get his approval. That is not what this is about. Like you got to enter this, like, he's so much smarter than you. Get off that thought. Just don't do that. So it ended. I'm in my bedroom and I actually have this moment where I go, oh, I'm really proud of myself. I stayed humble and I didn't do the thing I was afraid of. I wonder if we'll win a Peabody for that interview. And then I started laughing hysterically because I'm like, look at you, man. You're complimenting yourself on your humility. And then literally now you think maybe you'll win a Peabody. And I shared that then the next night at a meeting. I was like, the gift is I laughed out loud at it immediately. Totally. Whereas 15 years ago, I would have planned that Peabody for a good 2 hours.
Your acceptance speech, what you're going to wear, all of it.
Who I'm mad at.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Who you resent, who you're going to thank. Well, so my equivalent is one of my closest friends. Her name was Rachel Held Evans. She died a little over a year ago. And she's also a writer and speaker in progressive Christian circles and a dear friend. We started a conference we ran for years together. During the Obama administration, when she announced that she was invited to the White House prayer breakfast, my very first thought was, why wasn't I invited to the White House prayer breakfast? My second thought was, who the fuck thinks that? Like, what kind of person's like, why wasn't I invited to the White House? So I laughed at myself so fast.
Yeah. I love that we have that in common. And then just to give people kind of a brief history of your life, 1 million people love you, which they all reached out. So most people know this, but you're from Colorado. You had some addiction. You got sober. You became an author. You are 3 times New York's bestseller. And then you ended up becoming a Lutheran minister. And then you founded House for All Sinners and Saints, which is a congregation of Evangelical Lutheran Church in Denver. So how do you get from getting sober to occupying that role?
So I was raised super fundamentalist Christian, like kind of wackadoodle, sectarian. We went to church 3 times a week. Women weren't allowed to pray out loud in front of men, couldn't preach, couldn't be ushers. Even the whole thing about women not having authority over men was taken so seriously that when we turned 12, our Sunday school teachers were always women up until that point. And then we had a man as a Sunday school teacher because 12-year-old boys had more authority than grown women in the church I was raised in.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And we were the only Christians. Like, we really believe we're the only Christians. And so people would be like, hey, is your new friend Stacy a Christian? And I'd have to be like, no, she's a Baptist. And so it was that kind of deal. But it's all I knew. And of course, you don't know. Your childhood's crazy till you meet other people. And then you're like, oh, that's not normal. I left that church when I was probably 16, 17 years old. And I couldn't have anything to do with Christianity. I hated it.
Can I ask a really personal question?
Yeah, you can ask me.
Was there any
anything.
trauma that preceded the departure?
Okay, I had some trauma, but it had nothing to do with the church. I was just a really sick kid. I had an autoimmune disorder. It caused my eyes to bulge out. You could see white all around the iris. My eyelids couldn't close. So my eyes are bulged out of my face, and I couldn't have surgery till I was like 16.
Not Graves' disease
It is
or
Graves.
Graves?
It
yeah,
is
okay,
Graves.
okay.
But kids don't get Graves' disease, so it went undiagnosed for a long time. I had all this alienation, and when I get to high school, the only people who seemed to in any way think I was cool were the gay boys. Like, they loved me. What happened was, when there's a difference between what I'm told is true or what I'm told to believe is true and what I experience to be true, there's a problem. I was told homosexuality is an abomination and that, all this stuff. But then I go to high school and they thought I was fabulous. And it was my first experience of people thinking I was cool or even wanting to hang out with me. And It was love, right? These boys loved me and I loved them. And so what I was experiencing to be true was very different than what I taught was true. And I'm going to pretty much go with my experience if that happens. And also, I was told, women couldn't have authority over men, but I'm like, but hold on, why am I smarter than my male Sunday school teacher then? Stuff just didn't work. So I left. And I hated it. I didn't know any other form of Christianity existed. And I just thought it was damaging and irrational. Fundamentalism is something that is hard to leave, but it's hard to leave in more than one way because it gives you really dualistic thinking. It gives you this, there's good and bad, right and wrong, black and white. People are saved or they're lost.
It forces you to be a compartmentalizer because you're being confronted with reality and you're learning another thing. And then you're just really getting good at having multiple personalities virtually.
Right. You have to pretend things are true when you're experiencing them not to be true. It's easier to leave a fundamentalist church than it is to leave the thinking it gave you. And so I ended up becoming this super hardcore leftist activist, but with really the same kind of thinking. Either you're down with the cause or you're against, I was involved in this crazy armed land rights battle in northern New Mexico. Wow. It was nuts.
Armed land battle.
Okay. But it was the same mentality and in a way. And so I've had so much distance from it now that when I had a parishioner maybe 5-6 years ago, who was just coming out of fundamentalism, and which she would get so triggered and angry every time she saw something from one of her Christian friends on Facebook, like one of their stupid memes, she'd get so angry. And she said, Nadia, you don't seem angry about it anymore. She goes, when did you know you were free from that? And I realized I was free from it when I could look back on my religious upbringing and not view it dualistically, when I could allow myself to admit there were beautiful things about my upbringing, and that didn't feel like a betrayal of the part of me that the shitty things hurt.
Yeah.
Then I was free. That's when I left fundamentalism.
Boy, man, you're striking on such a larger issue, which is just binary thinking versus nuance and gray, and life is almost 99% nuance and gray.
Totally. It's harder for us to understand. We think categorically, and so we just want to put things in the right category all the time, which really is a matter of survival. You had to look at a plant and you're like, is that dinner or is it poison? Right? Mm-hmm. You couldn't be like, is it a shade of poison and maybe partially dinner? Right? You couldn't do it.
Is it psilocybin? It's poison and it's gray?
Exactly. So that was sort of my journey. So what happened was when I got sober, I kept hearing you got to do the God thing, the prayer thing. That's kind of how it works. And I realized I didn't really ever stop believing in God, ever. That didn't go away the whole time. I still loved Jesus. I just couldn't stand the church. And so I think that the theological non-specificity of the 12 steps is what allowed me to find a theological specificity that met me where my experience was, if that makes sense. So I discovered Lutheran theology is just really different than other Christian theology because it's based in paradox. It's not based in that dualistic thinking. It's based in holding really difficult things in tension together.
So you gave a eulogy or something?
Yeah, so I was kind of dipping my toe back into Christianity, but in this more social justice oriented kind of liberal Lutheranism. So I was going to church, and a good friend of mine named PJ Moore, I was also doing stand-up just because I couldn't afford therapy. And so I just, I'd rather make $30, emceeing a set at Comedy Works and work my shit out that way.
Sure.
I was part of this home group, this 12-step group that my friend PJ, he was a comic and he was a member of that group. And we were really good friends. And, he struggled a lot with mental illness issues. And he kind of lost the battle, So he ended up dying by suicide. And when he died, all of our friends just kind of turned to me and they're like, well, you can do his funeral, right? I hadn't been to seminary. I was just literally the only religious person in my friend group. So they assumed you could do it. And so I was like, I guess. So I gave his eulogy, and it was at the Comedy Works in downtown Denver, packed house. And I just looked at the crowd. It was like comics who were really trying to not show any emotion because it's like, social Darwinism runs very deep in the green room.
Yeah.
Academics and recovering alcoholics and queers. And I just look out at this sea of people and I'm standing there and I'm like, these are not church folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have a pastor. And then I was like, oh shit. I think that's supposed to be me. Like it really was this like, these people need somebody to pastor them. And then when I thought, oh, I think that's me, that set me on my path. So like my like so-called like call to ministry, it was not generic. I wanted to be a pastor to my people.
And then what was the education that you then took on?
Well, I ended up getting a degree in religion from CU Boulder, and then I have a master's of divinity from Iliff School of Theology.
Is there a process, though, whereby you get certified for Lutheranism?
It's extensive. You have to have a graduate degree in theology, and then you have to work as like a hospital chaplain for a while, and then you have to do a year of internship, and then there's a body of people, this committee that's walking with you the whole time. And at each point they decide, do you get to go to the next point? Right. And so it's not the easiest thing. And so when people are like, oh, I'm ordained too, universal life, because, I did my friend's wedding. I'm like, I was like, do you know how many years of education and training and like a group that represents another group of millions of people had to like check me all the way. And I have a bishop and, apostolic succession. The bishop laid hands on me, all of this stuff. You had a credit card transaction. So if you want to see them as comparable, knock yourself out. But I feel like you're asking a lot of me to see it as comparable.
You were watching Game of Thrones while you went through the online course, and you didn't miss any of the plot. So
yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And I'm catching up. It's so stupid. I didn't think of this. But Lutheranism is Martin Luther, right? And he led the big break away from Catholicism.
Yeah. So my church, House for All Sinners and Saints, that I started, our church logo is like a piece of parchment with a nail at the top, like 95 Theses on the door of the Wittenberg Church. And so we used to have shirts that had that on the front, and on the back it said "Radical Protestants nailing shit to the church door since 1517." Like that.
Oh, that was gangster.
That was our church shirt. Yeah.
Okay, so I watched a video of yours today. You read this passage, and it's about these emperors, basically. And then you started thinking in terms of what did those people really feel when that was written? What were they experiencing? And you said what they're experiencing was basically oppression from these people, these monarchs. And you asked your own parishioners what things they felt oppressed by or subjugated by. And overwhelmingly, it was depression and anxiety and these different things. And then you go on to say, and this gave me chills, you said, these guys, Pontius Pilate and whoever else, are only remembered because they are a footnote to a man named Jesus who hung out with fishermen and sex workers. And that's why they're remembered. They're a footnote to someone more important. And your anxiety is a footnote to your life. And your boss is a footnote to your life. And I got chills and I'm getting them now. Look, Monica, full-blown goosebump. I'm like, what a fucking kick-ass interpretation of that. And so I immediately was like, that's kind of my introduction to what you think and how you're approaching this whole thing. Now, here's where I'm confused. So to me, you're wading through so much stuff to pull out what is good about it. Yes, you did find something that's so inspiring and so beautiful, but man, you had to pull it out of that text. And I'll also argue you had to ignore so much of the text in getting to the things that you would want other people to embrace. Yes. And so my question is, why aren't there, among the many like-minded people like you, why would it be impossible for you to get together and amend the fucking Constitution you guys have? Like, we had a Constitution and it had slavery in it. And, at some point we said slavery's bullshit and we amended the Constitution. We didn't leave it in there and just go, oh, skip that part. We amended it. Why don't you guys get together and pull out what's great from that book and find some consensus and just ditch all the misogyny, the slavery,
for sure. Yeah.
The homophobia, the patriarchal, there's so much stuff.
Right.
Help me
Yeah.
understand why that's not an option.
Well, Thomas Jefferson did that. Did you know that?
Oh, no.
Yeah, he literally just cut all the shit out he didn't like. There's the Thomas Jefferson Bible. Yeah, okay, so.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's not an unheard of instinct. But also, the thing about the Bible is it's like the world's most fucked up family album, right? So, okay, we could say Uncle Lester, the molester, we don't want him in there anymore. But if we do that, we don't know what to look for in the next generation, right? To me, to say, hey, there's all that shit in there, all of that is just the disaster of human behavior and greed and hatred, right? So I don't want to forget it. You know, kind of like in the Psalms, there are Psalms that are beautiful and praising God for the Leviathan, the sea monsters, like it's all good, it's all, you know, beautiful. But then there's Psalms where it's like, I want to bash my enemies' babies' heads against the stones, you know, and people are like, they're so violent. I'm like, you've never thought a violent thing? Like, that's not somehow part of your makeup. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's about this incredible breadth of the human experience when it comes to ourselves and to trying to understand the divine. And it doesn't mean that all of it's good. A lot of it is absolutely garbage. But here's like something that the Constitution and the Bible have in common is the way people leverage it to their own advantage and pretend that's not what they're doing. So constitutional originalists who are like, hey, it's not me. This is just what the founders wanted. This is what the people who drafted the Constitution intended. So it's not my interpretation. I'm like, oh, it just happens to benefit the category of citizen you are. That's a fucking coincidence. Show me a black female jurist who's a constitutional originalist. Right? That's not a thing. Same with the Bible. You know, people do the same exact thing. In my upbringing, they're like, hey, this is not about us. The men who were preaching and teaching us to behave a certain way. I had to go to Christian charm class. You can tell that fucking worked like a charm.
Yeah, I find you to be
charming as fuck. So they're saying, hey, it's not us. This is God's will. And they're like, so go make me a burger, right? So the reason I'm still in the game, the reason I won't leave is because Scripture, liturgy, theology, these things are way too potent to be left in the hands of people who only use them to justify their dominance over another group of people.
Yes. And look, I'm very, very grateful that you're a voice in Christianity for that exact reason. But let me try to transpose something more current that I would say arguably sounds like a similar defense, is the Civil War generals that are decorating many town squares across America. I feel like the argument you're making is a little similar to those people saying, well, if we get rid of those statues, we're getting rid of the history, to which I would argue, no, what we've done is stop celebrating them. They're not going to be absent from the war chronicles. And similarly, I would say to you, that book is worshiped. The book isn't the history of Western civilization. It is a religious text that people read before bed, and they read to their children, and their children... It's a teaching tool. And so I'm a little nervous that it's not in the context that I would prefer it to be. Like, look at all the gnarliness of humanness. Look at the patriarchy. Look at this.
Right, for sure. But I would say, using your analogy, it's to say, look, we're not going to inscribe the bash babies' heads against the stones psalm on a plaque and then have that in our public square.
Okay.
We're not going to take it out of the book, just like we're not going to take what the Confederacy was about out of the textbooks, right? We're not going to remove that, but we're not going to worship it. And you're right. You use the right word. People worship the Bible. And there's a theological term for that. It's called idolatry, because the Bible's not God.
Well, yeah, that could be another 3-hour conversation with you and I. That there's the notion that a man wrote it. And that a man is the man who wrote it is recalling what he learned in a 9-hour seminar. You couldn't put 25 people in a room, give them a half-hour speech, get them out of the room, have them write it down, and get anything above 20% accuracy.
Sure, of course.
That's its own concerning issue. But
I do think that there's something inspired to it, but that doesn't mean God. You know how the presidents to sign their name, they have that little machine that does the thing. You know?
Oh,
It's
I
not
know.
like, oh yeah, there's a way that you can have your autograph with a pen and it does it.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Ah.
It's
So-
like been mechanized.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a fancy word for it. I don't know what it is, but it's not like that kind of transcription system. It's people struggling with their experience of themselves and their ideas of God and inspiration all at the same time. So it's always going to be a mix of those things. And so to me, again, as a Lutheran, I just have a different view of the Bible than most Christians do, because that term, like the word of God, right?
Uh-huh.
To Lutherans, that term means Jesus. That's the word of God is Jesus. The prologue to John said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. So to Lutherans, we're like, that's the word of God. It's a person that we can read about, talk about, preach about, sing about, like that's the word. Now, secondly, the word of God is any kind of preaching or music or whatever that tells that story. And then only thirdly, in a tertiary sense, it's the text. And so Martin Luther said the Bible's the cradle that holds Christ. The cradle isn't Christ. This is where people get super confused. So they confuse the wrapping and the gift, you know?
Right.
And so to me, anything in there that talks about grace and forgiveness and all the stuff that whole Jesus thing was about, that has more gravity. That has more authority than anything else in the Bible. And then anything that comes close to that message has more authority. Now, the farther out you get from that message, the less authority it has.
And farther out, does that mean in time and space? Like
in terms of what that message is. If they're like, well, what do you do with the verse that says that if a man lays with another man, he should be stoned to death? I'm like, oh, so sorry. I don't have a horse in that race. Like I don't have to like stand up for some shit that's way out here compared to the central message.
Yeah, I already have my answer. You do believe that's relevant and it has value and it should be in there, despite the fact that you're not going to make that part of one of your speeches.
Right.
It's a bummer to me that it still is weaponized by a big sector of the country. It still is
For sure.
their proof that they can stand on why marriage between two men will ruin marriage because they have this text
that's camouflage for their own hangups. That's all it is.
Totally.
So the thing where you got goosebumps from this message, I would argue that in some way that's difficult to articulate. It's because there's something in that book that when you do the work and you dig, there's like something transcendent. It's an endless reservoir of meaning and transformation that can be found in it that you're not going to find on Oprah's book club list.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
Well, I had a guest on, Pete Holmes.
Oh, Pete. Oh,
Do you know
Pete's a
Pete?
friend of mine. Yeah, I've been on his podcast. Matter of fact, behind me right here is a still from The Simpsons.
Oh, that he
And
got?
an episode he wrote. And one of my books is on the table. Accidental Saints by Nadia Bolz-Weber is on the table.
That's
Isn't that
awesome.
amazing?
And I love him. And he did make a great point when I brought up, what is the story where God wants the man to kill his son?
Isaac and
Isaac.
Abraham.
You know, and
man, I'm glad I got that right. all those theology degrees, man. If I've been like, give me a minute.
We would have edited out the pause. We would have made you look good. Yeah. But he made a very stellar point, which is, your feelings aside, you and I are talking about that story. And that's 2,000 years old. So you got to at least respect the staying power of it, which I totally do. Clearly, there's some magic there.
I would say because it's true. Now, hear me out. The reason we are still telling these stories is because the stories are true. Now, here's something the Enlightenment stole from us, is the ability to distinguish between fact and truth. So if somebody says, do you think it's a fact that Jesus was born of a virgin, like a medical fact? I'm like, fuck, is it a fact? That's unknowable. Is it true? It's absolutely true.
Help me out.
Yeah,
Go a little
what's
further.
the distinction?
Like to me, that sounds a little bit like I do recognize there are emotional truths that are often in opposition to empirical facts. I recognize that. And a big part of our life is emotional and spiritual. So it has to be given the same weight.
That's right. I guess that's kind of what I'm saying, is that there is truth to these stories. There's a spiritual truth to them. And when people get hung up on, but is it verifiably, factually true? We weren't even thinking about verifiable, factual truth until about 20 minutes ago in humanity, right? You know, the scientific method and human reason and all that shit that the Enlightenment, hey, I'm a fan of penicillin. Like, I'm not saying it was bad for us, but I'm just saying Charles Taylor said the Enlightenment gave with one hand and stole with the other. So there are things that it took from us. And so fundamentalism did not exist before the Enlightenment. Fundamentalism is literally a reaction to the Enlightenment.
Right. Are you anti-enlightenment?
No, I think that there are things that it gave and things it took away. Because now, after the Enlightenment, if we have a way of understanding reality, like the scientific method, verifiable facts, things like this, now that human reason has been elevated in that way, then these other things that we know are true in terms of religion, now, in order for us to still think they're true, we have to believe they're fact in the same way. That idea of a literal 7-day creation thing, creationism, that's this weird mix of like the Enlightenment telling us there's only one way to understand what's true.
But then would we say that what's true is subjective versus what's factual is objective?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I don't know that I have an answer for that. Yeah, that is a really good question.
I just have a few thoughts that in order to lay them out correctly, I wanted to write them down this morning. So here's one thing I thought. Do you think the blind eye we turn towards the gnarly parts of the Bible is easy for us to do because we've been conditioned through having parents who are deeply flawed and may have hurt us, but who we love deeply? Do you think our willingness to accept this misogynistic, xenophobic, scientifically inaccurate, geologically impossible text is sad in that it's sad we've been trained to accept that because we desire the love of our Father or God that much? Isn't this one big abusive relationship? Shouldn't we reject the love of someone who would ask us to kill our son to prove our love and commitment to him? Isn't that pathological?
Okay.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. I guess my question of that story is less like, what kind of God is it that would ask this? And more, what is it within humans that makes us believe that God asks this of us? So there's a truth to be found in the story, but for me, but it's not the one I think I was taught.
Yeah. But what's been explained to me in defense of that story is that, well, God didn't kill his son. And that when he proved his love and devotion to God, of course, God would never let him kill his son, and he didn't. But I'm not very satiated with that answer. That's still a very vain God who wants to test your love and has clearly shown there's conditions to his love.
Right.
And that is so similar to our flawed parents we all have. And I'm sure my kids will feel the same way about me. And I get worried that we're like conditioned to ignore what we know. Like you were saying, you know, like the reality is not meeting up with what you're being taught. And I think sadly, we're pretty conditioned to be that way.
Yeah. Do you know who Dave Javerbaum is? He is God on Twitter. The tweet of God. Yeah.
Yes.
He had a show on Broadway that was called, it was basically God offers new commandments. Like he has some
Did Sean Hayes
holdovers.
star in it?
Yeah.
I saw it.
Yes,
I saw it.
okay.
I saw it. Yep.
So one of the most brilliant, there's a term called exegesis, which is where you take a text in the Bible and you just dig the shit out of it. Like you kind of go, what is this word? What is that? You look for, what's the interpretation? You just go to town with, could it mean this? Could it mean that? And he's an atheist. I mean, I've hung out with the dude. He's an atheist, but he had, to me, the most astounding interpretation, exegetical approach to this Isaac and Abraham story. I don't know if you remember, but he goes, one of the commandments was, thou shalt not seek to have a personal relationship with me. Right? This is evangelicals are all about their like personal relationship with God, you know?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So one of the new commandments, don't seek that out, right? And he goes,
We're
here's
not
why.
bros.
Yeah. He goes, here's why. It's for your own good. Because I had a personal relationship with one of you once, and it brought out the worst in me. So in the text, Abraham has a very particular relationship with God.
They were just close.
Yeah, they were just, they were bros.
Okay.
Let's
Yeah.
just say.
Yeah.
Okay. In Dave's interpretation, God in the play is saying, don't try and have a personal relationship with me. It brought out the worst in me because I really was close to this guy, Abraham, so much so that I said, I want to give you your heart's desire. And what Abraham and Sarah wanted more than anything in the world was to have a son. And Sarah was old. They were old, right? They were like, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And an angel comes and says, no, your descendants are going to fill the land. And Sarah laughs because she's like, I got a dusty ass womb. There's no way that's happening.
yeah.
That's adorable, but
Your
that's
seed
not
may not
happening.
find
That's right.
purchase here.
Exactly. And then they had this son, Isaac, right? And so imagine if you're elderly and you think it's never going to happen. You have this like precious son. And so God's like, yeah, I had a close relationship. And he goes, what do you want? And he goes, I want a son. And I gave him the thing he wanted more than anything in the world. And he loved that son so much that I started thinking, does he love that son more than he loves me? And then I did a super fucked up thing. And I
Right.
tested him. Like,
Yeah.
do you love this son? Will you kill the son for me? Right. And
Yeah.
so it was this genius telling of the story. But to me, the stories in the Bible tell us about ourselves. And if we're lucky, we get a glimpse of some kind of truth about the divine as well.
Okay, so in your mind, because again, and I'm not saying this in a patronizing way, to me, since I don't believe that the man Jesus Christos was actually the Son of God, I recognize there was a man here by that name who has a history. I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But because I don't believe he was divine,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you do, but then I do recognize that you also are going to concede that the earth was probably not made in 7 days. Where are you on the part where is the God you worship that vain? That he could make a mistake? Is he all-knowing and omnipotent, but yet also got jealous of a child he created?
I think God was like, oh man, you guys drive me nuts. Okay, let's see. What can I do to set this straight? And so God's like, I think I'll just make myself manifest inside rapidly dividing cells inside the womb of an insignificant Palestinian girl in the first century who's not married. And I'll see how they do it. Like forever, this is how I want to be known as, as like a completely powerless, vulnerable, homeless infant that has no place in our society at all. Like absolutely marginalized. And God's like, this is forever how I want to be known.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's yeah. In that, if there were a God and the God chose to send his son down and he put him in that position, it would be very admirable. That's what I would hope a God would do. I'm not big enough to do that. I have children and I've made money and I can tell you I'm not going to help them when they're older, but I'm going to fucking help them when they're older because I'm not big enough to do that. I'm too human to let them suffer.
I actually don't dig the whole Son of God thing, though.
You don't. So Jesus is just God.
Yeah.
Okay.
And here's the thing is when people start talking about Jesus like he's God's little boy, it gets very disturbing to me because it's like God is divine child abuser. So then the story is like God had a little boy. He only had one. We don't know. Fertility issues? Not sure. God had this little boy, and he loved that little boy so much. But you know what he had to do? Because you masturbated, he had to kill that little boy. It's like, oh my God, how in the world are you coming?
Yeah.
So
he died because I put my mom's underwear on once when I was 9.
Yeah. And so it's your fault and you should feel real bad. Matter of fact, you should feel so bad about the fact that you caused God to kill his little boy he loves so much that you're good. Like this is the whole...
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Evangelical Christianity. God is divine child abuser trying to make you feel bad so that you'll act good.
Yeah.
I don't buy it. Now, it's also technically heresy.
To say that he's the son of God is heresy?
Not to use that term, but functionally, if people mostly in American evangelical Christianity, if you say God, they think God the Father.
Right,
The dude,
yeah.
dude in the sky, all the power, long beard.
Yeah.
Capricious, killer surveillance system.
A Robert Crumb drawing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's what they think. Then there's just a couple kind of minor supporting characters, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, who are less important. Well, that's heresy. It's called Arianism, not related to the racist thing.
Right.
But, in the 4th century, it was ruled heretical. So at the Council of Nicaea, when they came up with this sort of formula for this is what Christians believe, they were like, it was all about who is Christ, and it was all about the Trinitarian thing.
Yeah.
And so to them, they're like, no, Jesus is God.
Great.
God is 3 things at the same time. Now talk about like paradox and not dualistic thinking, that God is like relationship.
Well, my favorite meme, I'm sure you've seen it, is a picture of Jesus praying. Have you seen this one? It's Jesus is praying and it says, God, can you hear me? It's me, you.
Totally. But I know like Trinitarian theology is a bit of a mental pretzel, but I like it because it keeps us from getting too prideful about knowing exactly what the divine is like. Like, I kind of like the fact that it's super puzzling.
Yeah.
And-
In fact, in my it's not to say that I'm judgmentless of Christians. Again, I am truly in support of anyone that's finding any peace and harmony and betterment through that. I truly am. The arrogance flag gets waved when the notion that you could understand this thing.
Totally. I need a God who is maybe slightly more mysterious and nimble and powerful than my ability to understand God.
Yes.
Right?
I agree. Your
other-
problems, that's an AA thing. It's like,
Yeah.
I need a God that's big enough to solve my problems because I can't.
Yeah. But the Trinitarian thing also, it's kind of like, I think of baseball, like if the bases, honest to God, were like 1 inch farther apart, they'd never score. And if the bases were like 1 inch closer, they'd score all the time and it would be even more boring. So I think of that with like Trinitarian theology, this idea of these 3 beings in relationship, or 3 ideas, or 3 pieces of wisdom or truths or whatever in relationship is balanced in that way. So anyway, I would say technically most Christians in America are heretics. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm having a hard time differentiating is when you read and you're interpreting these stories and you're finding the humanity takeaways and how it's reflecting what we do on earth. What is the difference between what you're doing and then like how we'd read the Bible the same way, where we don't believe in God, but we're still taking it as, what's a nicer word than fable. But like, these are lessons. These are lessons. And
Beautiful teachings.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's definitely stuff to be learned, whether you're an atheist or you believe. And I guess for me, the people who are strong believers believe the text. And it seems like you interpret the text. So what is the difference between what you are doing and what we're doing? You believe in Jesus, but what does that mean? What do you believe he does for you? Or you just believe he's real? We believe he was real.
Yeah, he mostly gets me better parking spaces.
Oh, man, I got to start
I would like
praying.
believing for that. Yeah.
I mean, once you get a gold card status, it comes with the parking.
Yeah.
VIP all the way.
I don't know. That's a really good question because I do believe the stuff. Like, I'm down. Like, I believe in the miracles. I believe all the crazy shit. Now, it's very hard for me to like defend why I believe it because it's faith.
Right.
I don't
Yeah,
never
sure.
understood, how do you defend faith?
Right.
It's never appealed to me to even try.
Yeah.
And so I just get back to like the fact that I don't really care. Like when I was in my parish, I didn't care what my parishioners believed, but I cared deeply what they heard, what they heard from me. I was responsible for what they heard. And for me, the point of gravity to the whole thing is grace. That's the center point of the whole deal. If it's anything other than grace and mercy and forgiveness, then I don't think it's actually Christian.
Well, and I want to say, anyone that were to hear of Jesus's literal life and who he chose to spend time with and what the message was he said that we know for sure. I can't imagine there's a human on earth that would object to his lifestyle and his message of forgiveness and his message of love and his message of inclusion. There's no question that that person was a Siddhartha, a Buddha, or one of these wonderful, enlightened human beings that have been here.
Right.
Or maybe
Right.
not a human being, but there's no pushback for me or Monica, or I can't imagine anyone on the message, the teachings, the spirit of Jesus. I'm with
For sure.
you on that.
Now, okay, I end up speaking at a lot of events that aren't Christian events. So I'm at it's such an insufferable term, but thought leader gatherings.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And feminist gatherings and wellness conference, all this stuff that's not Christian, right? They're like, bring in the token one we can handle.
We can handle.
Yeah.
We're guilty of that
And
as
so-
well.
yeah, exactly.
I watched your shit and I was like, I can talk to this person.
And so people come up to me again, they tell me their stories about, hey, I was raised Catholic, but my mom finally divorced my abusive dad, and then they wouldn't give her communion anymore, so I can't have anything to do with the church. I left. Or, I was raised Methodist, but, the pastor was embezzling money, and I really looked up to him, and I was like, I can't do it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Not once has somebody come up to me and be like, well, I was raised Christian, but then one day I just realized that Jesus guy just doesn't have much to offer.
Yeah.
Right.
Not once. And so what I realized is that people don't leave Christianity because they stop believing in the teachings of Jesus. People leave Christianity because they believe in the teachings of Jesus so much, they can't stomach being part of an institution that claims to be about that and clearly isn't.
Yeah, I agree. And then I just want to take 1 second to bond with you because I'm being adversarial, but I also don't want to bond with you because in my own life, I have an experience you're describing, which is I enjoy reading critiques of AA. People have sent me lots of scholarly critiques of AA, and it does fit the definition of a cult. There is stuff I can't deny about it, right? And then for me, it comes down to all of that could be true, but that happens to be the thing that saved my life. And I had tried nearly every other thing. So regardless of what your academic resistance to AA is, I can only go on the fact that it saved my life. And that I also did things that I don't do, that I don't believe in. And the act of doing those things I don't believe in is actually just an act of humility, which I greatly needed. And also, I couldn't solve the problem on my own. And there's some magic in there. And I don't know that I could put it into text. So that's something that I'm not even threatened when people hate on AA. I'm like, yeah, I get it too, man. If I were you, it would look like Scientology to me. And great. But for me, I'm only here because of it. So I don't know what to tell you.
Right. I think the big book had some kind of divine inspiration to it.
I do too, but let me tell you, I am in favor of amending that book. They need to get rid of some of the language. They need to make it, in my opinion, less Christian. I mean, they're saying a God of your understanding, but it is still very Christian leaning, in my opinion. I do think we should amend that book. There's some misogynistic stuff. There's, to the wives. There's stuff that we could do better. We could take the same message and we could do better. Let me give you another example. I say I'm in AA.
Right.
I'm not allowed to do that. But I also understand that I'm doing it in 2020. And that law was written for AA in 1956. And it was
when there were 36 people and one of them goes, hey, I got sober in AA. And then 6 months later, they're drinking. The impact to AA when one of 36 people it's not working for is very different.
So I'm like you. I'm trying to find what is the real intention of that. And the intention of that tradition of being anonymous at the level of press and whatever, the intention is no person should become the symbol of AA. I shouldn't be the face of AA. And then when I fail, that shouldn't be an indictment of AA. And so I say I'm in AA because I'm okay with some people being mad at me to get the 25 people that listen to this show that then found themselves in an AA meeting. I'll live with the 25 people that maybe lived for the old timers I'm pissing off.
I mean, the spirit of the thing or the letter of the thing.
Yes.
It's the same deal with scripture. I mean, Jesus had some harsh things to say about divorce, right? Well, at the time, it truly was a really radical way to protect women because at the time, if a man could just issue a letter of divorce whenever he wanted to. And it's not like she could go back to teaching.
No,
you know what I mean?
it's a death sentence.
It's a death sentence.
That's right.
And so a thing that was intended to be a protection of the vulnerable, how is it weaponized against people in the church? By telling your mom, who left her abusive husband, she can't have communion anymore because she got divorced. Are you fucking kidding me?
Right. It's
I mean,
like
it
the
makes
exact
me
opposite
crazy.
outcome of the intention.
And pridefully so, right? Then they have just filled with pride about, well, you know, we're walking the narrow path and it's not popular. No, you're not popular because you're an asshole. Don't confuse those two things.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, every population of people have had deities. They've had a creation story. There's nothing unique.
Yes.
We all do this, right?
Totally. Yes.
And there's a ton of very valid now scientific evidence for the evolutionary benefit of us believing in God. It allowed us to gather in groups of large numbers, allowed us to trust other people. If we both believe in the same God, I know you're a friend. It was rewarded heavily through evolution to believe in God.
Sure. Social cohesion.
Yeah.
It curbed people's evil desires because there were rules. Yeah, sure.
And now if you're a theologian, so you look at the Judeo-Christian tradition, you know, we know it comes from Mesopotamia, that area. We know that area was between the Tigris and the Euphrates. We know that area flooded all the time. And when it flooded, it was apocalyptic. It wasn't like a flood we'd deal with. It was life-ending. You compare it to a religion that is cropping up at the exact same time in Egypt, where they live on a fertile crescent. Everything's predictable. They're not losing crops. There's no famine.
Sure.
Their God is far less of a fear-mongering God that needs constant appeasement, constant acts of worship. And so what do you do with that info? Someone like you, where you can recognize like, oh, the environment can predict what kind of religion the people will create. And does it make you question, wow, I'm using a religion that was created in a world that was very insecure, and I don't live in a world that's insecure. Is this the best fit anymore?
Yeah, I do find it interesting, but I think always it's going to be human beings struggling with what it means to live together, what it means to live on this planet, how we understand transcendence. It's always going to be a variety of those things. So to me, it's interesting because it tells us so much about ourselves. And when I think anthropologically about religion, which I oddly do a lot, it's because human beings have always been religious. Like religion has fashioned itself in endless variety, every place, every culture, every time, because there's certain, I would argue, there are certain just needs in the human being that have always been met through religion. And again, not to talk shit about the Enlightenment, but
Steven Pinker is going to write you a hate letter.
But it gave us a lot, but it didn't remove the needs that were met through religion. So this is one of the things I see as why I do my work, is because I'm interested in what are the needs that aren't getting met because people aren't going to church. And instead of saying, how can I get them to go to church, or how can I make church more sexy and appealing, I'm just out there doing my work thinking this meets a religious need in people.
Yeah.
So I don't care if they intellectually assent to the same theological propositions I do. It doesn't matter.
You just want to provide comfort and safety and community.
Yeah, that's why I started my podcast, The Confessional, because I've been part of 2 different communities that practice some form of confession, right? 12 Steps and the Lutheran Church.
Yeah.
And when people in my church, they'd avail themselves of private confession and absolution with some regularity. And it was always an honor to hear their, but often super boring.
Oh, okay. Like, because they wasn't spicy enough?
No, I'd be like, they'd finish. They'd be so tense, you know, they'd finish. And I'm like nothing personal, but I'm super unimpressed with your sin. Forgiveness is for everyone. So you might go out and try harder next time. Make it count.
Where's the underage sex? Where's give me some shame.
This one girl, her confession was something really, it was spicy. It was something really real. And she was so tense at the beginning. And then afterwards she was like, relaxed, we were laughing, broke the tension. And she goes, Pastor Nadia, I just want to say that I'm so glad that you're my pastor, because I just know you've done a lot worse than that.
Yeah.
See, it's like a little service. It's a service I offer. But knowing that's a function of religion, but most people aren't religious now, I wanted to create a place where people could talk about stuff that still haunts them, you know?
Yeah.
And then at the end of every episode, I write a benediction just for them. I write an original blessing that I record at the end. And so again, where do you receive a blessing? That was a function. That was a priestly function. Where do we substituted like Instagram likes?
Yeah.
Where do we go to receive a blessing? So I'm writing blessings for people. And so I guess I see myself as like a public pastor in that way. I describe it as I've sort of like snuck into the cathedral and grabbed the most beautiful stuff and put it out on the lawn with a free sign.
Yeah. No, I think
great.
it's so wonderful, and I see the value you're adding to tons of people's lives. That's very clear to me.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
Now, when I was talking to my wife before I came here, I had written out a few things, and I thought, I know better than to just speak. So I ran by her some of my thoughts, and like she really liked the parent analogy, right? And it's funny when you have kids, you see how we train them, and it starts with Santa Claus, and it's like it becomes this huge fucking conundrum when you're a parent. For me, who values honesty above all things, that was the thing I thought was missing with adults in me when I was a kid, and I go, okay, so there's this guy, he comes down the chimney, red suit, lives in North Pole, sees everyone, blah blah blah, and I can see on this 3-year-old's face, that doesn't make sense, right? And I see the best part of her punching holes through that. And then I find myself creating more lies to get her to believe that, well, how does he get everywhere? Oh, well, he can kind of stop time, right? So he's doing this through a long, long period. But for us, it's only 8 hours at night. But for him, it's like God knows how long. And while I'm doing that, because the first child, we did it for a while until there were so many lies. I was like, now there's a fucking elf on the shelf. And if you touch the elf, then you're going to hell, or he won't come back, or he's got to go. And I'm like, oh my God. So I quickly thought, oh, this is a little thing that we can start telling people to not listen to their intuition and to ignore the best part of their brain, the critical part that's punching holes in it, and go, no, well, just forget about those and just believe in it, because there's presents coming and there's heaven coming. And I saw the parallels, and I'm like, oh, we start them on Santa Claus because it's so immediately appealing. That then the transition into, oh yeah, there's this guy, he's his dad, he's his son, he blah, 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 he's born to a virgin. That we've kind of hardwired them to just ignore all that critical thinking and go with it for this ultimate prize. My wife told me when I was laying this out, she said, the thing you're ignoring is the emotional aspect of this. And you have to recognize that a lot of people like me have great anxiety. Not everyone's like you, like so self-assured, and you're not fearful of this and that. A lot of people want a dad, or they want a mother. They want someone above them that can comfort them with the anxiety that so many of us deal with just living on this planet in these cities in the way that we weren't designed to live, that you can't take that comfort away from people. And so I recognize that, and she is dead right. And I'm glad she pointed it out. And to me, I would argue, I get that from community. I get that from, if you look at people's needs, right? It's like fresh air, it's water, it's food, it's shelter, and it's fucking acceptance. It's as important.
Totally.
You'll die without it.
Yeah.
But does it matter whether or not the magic of church is that community and the acceptance? I pointed out to her, we had a bunch of people over yesterday. There was this mass cohesion. Everyone was getting along. It was so wonderful. I said, did you have any anxiety during that period? She's like, no, I didn't. I go, because you were in a group, you were in a community, all was good, you were safe. Can't we get all that without the Father?
I think people do. I think that there's a brilliant book by Dave Zoll called Seculosity, which is basically saying, look, religion just makes you feel bad about yourself. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But in the book, he argues, instead of yammering on about how much time you're spending at church so that you can feel good, you talk about how much time you spend at the gym so you can justify your existence, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Now, rather than only thinking clean thoughts, we're only eating clean food. You know, we've just substituted like purity systems, and then we congratulate ourselves from getting away from religion. You know,
I totally agree with you. The whole original sin thing, I do think exists in all of us. Like, we are so prone to that guilt and the feeling of toxicity and needing cleansing.
For sure. And so where do we find that? I mean, you can find that in like a really deeply, deeply rooted mythological system, sacred texts, certain liturgies, practices. One of the reasons I do like church, and I'm a liturgical person, so I like really deeply traditional church.
I didn't know. I don't know
like
liturgical. Thank you. We love new words. What is liturgical?
Yeah. So have you ever been to like a Catholic mass or an Episcopal service? That's a liturgical service. So it's a liturgy. So you're singing the Kyrie, and now you're going to do the Lord's Prayer, and there's ritual to it. And there's parts of it that are unchanged. And so at House for All Sinners and Saints, it was very liturgical. We used very traditional worship. We did a Gregorian chant setting of the liturgy.
I love those.
But it wasn't conventional. So we did it totally in the round, led by a drag queen. I mean, it's like It wasn't conventional, but it was traditional. And so I'm really drawn to that myself. And the reason is because that the liturgy has been sort of worn smooth by generations of people before me and contains the wisdom, the practices, their pain, their joy in it somehow because it's been done for so long in that way. And so the liturgy, because of that, has an integrity of its own. And why that's important to me is it doesn't demand my integrity in order for it to be efficacious. That's meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And so if you're kind of just making up your own thing and taking a little from this and reading a little Thich Nhat Hanh and then taking a hot yoga class, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think
it's half measures availed us nothing.
It's
is that
okay.
What it is?
I mean, I'm not saying there's something wrong, but I think when people are like, I'm spiritual, not religious, I think what they mean is like, I have curated a set of beliefs and practices in my life that give me a sense of well-being.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. The thing I do wonder about it, though, is if that's your approach, are you going to curate the aspects that say, hey, think about giving away 10% of your income?
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, also pray for your enemies and forgive people and, invite people to your home that you're uncomfortable with or whatever. Like, is it going to include shit like that? Unless it afflicts the comfortable and comforts the afflicted, it might make you feel well, but it's not probably going to transform you.
I agree with you. Becoming self-actualized through these 3 or 4 different things may work for some people. And I'm also nervous, those things that you pointed out that I think, being a cohesive member of a group can give you or help you find.
Right.
I have to ask the question that started this whole thing. So the whole reason I was ranting and the whole reason people suggested I talk to you, and I think rightly so, is you are a feminist. So the issue I raised is I was sitting in a meeting and I think it was at a church. So I was looking at all this different religious stuff, right? And I was just looking around. I was looking at the Last Supper, right? I'm looking at this different thing. I'm looking at it's like Jesus is a dude. The apostles are all dudes. God doesn't have a wife. There's no woman involved. The only woman is this virgin. She couldn't be accepted if she hadn't been a virgin. And then the other one is Mary Magdalene, and she is a sex worker, right? Or something? No, I got this wrong last time as well.
No, Mary Magdalene was not a sex worker.
Oh, who?
She's conflated in the text with other women. So she did have 7 demons cast out of her. So she did have kind of a rough story.
Uh-huh. Well, who were the sex workers you were referencing that he hung with?
Oh, there's lots of those.
Okay.
It's just not Mary Magdalene. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking around at all this stuff. And again, I don't have the knowledge of the Bible that I should even be speaking on it, but my understanding of it is basically, I was just thinking if I was a woman, this is identical to women sitting in a classroom where you look up on the wall and it's Abraham Lincoln and it's George Washington and it's Thomas Edison. And like, where is your place in this? Like, to me, that is such an indictment of how patriarchal history is there's no place for you. How does a young girl sit in that classroom and aspire when there's no one there representing her? And I just got very critical of the religion is just like, who is the hero? Who's the female hero? And then I said that, and I got all these responses from people, understandably so, who are defending their faith, Well, you don't know about this woman. She was awesome. Mind you, they listed 5 or 6 women, but I've never fucking heard of them. Maybe they know, maybe they exist.
Out of like hundreds in the Bible.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, it would be crazy to ignore the lopsidedness of that book and the religion in general, that the women, I don't know why my daughter would want to join that religion. And they said you could answer that. So.
Oh, God. Well, fuck them very much, first of all. But yeah, for sure. It's written from a male perspective. It's mostly male characters. But, for instance, who was Mary Magdalene? There was one person who was chosen to witness the resurrection and told to go and tell everyone else about it. That's Mary Magdalene.
Oh, okay.
She was told, go and tell. She is the apostle to the apostles. None of this shit would exist if she had not done that.
Yeah, the most impressive thing was the resurrection, right?
Yeah, I would say
more than water
pretty...
into wine. I'd rather be able to rise from the dead than have wine when I wanted it.
Well, now, but
Yeah. No, in the past I was actually choosing death for the wine. Yeah.
Exactly. Another thing about when we're talking about like, is something fact or is it true or what do you believe, the Enlightenment, all that stuff, is that there are a lot of liberal Christians who don't really believe in the resurrection. Like they're like, no, it was that his God consciousness was so complete that even after he died, it felt like he was still with them. They do this thing where they're like, no, because it's just silly to believe in something so anti-scientific, right?
Right.
I'm like, I totally believe in the bodily resurrection. And the reason is because the body is pretty important throughout the whole story. I don't want it to end with it suddenly being an idea. The idea that God's in a human body and then God takes on a human body. And then his Last Supper, he's like, this bread is my body, like eat it. Like it's so disturbingly physical in like a super redemptive way for me that I don't want it at the end of the story for the body to just now be a feeling or an idea. I like the crazy thing about a resurrected.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
I'm totally keeping
It's
up
the moment in
with
Sixth
story.
Sense where you realize Bruce Willis has been dead the whole time. I mean, there's no
Exactly,
movie without
what?
that turn.
That's right. So I get why it seems super crazy to believe it.
Yeah, but I'm fine. I'm fine with that. I guess I'm not fine with the lack of females in the religion. I'm not. And I don't know how everyone addresses that.
But where is that not true?
I agree with you, but we have the option of going forward, changing that and including and putting the pictures on the wall and putting in the classroom, RGB and all these people that deserve to be up there.
Sure.
You don't even have that option, to my knowledge. You couldn't really decorate a church with all these women that are symbols of power. I don't know how you fix it with you already have a set of characters.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot more than people talk about in the Bible. Like there's an awesome one. Yael was this woman who in the Old Testament in Judges where they were at war and there was the captain of the army and they were trying to win the battle. And so she kind of like tells the captain of the army, she sneaks in his tent and she was like, hey, come in here. And he goes, what? He stumbles in like a stupid idiot. Yeah. And then she puts a tent stake through his head.
Ooh.
Yeah, man.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, why isn't she in the stained glass window?
There should be a picture of her holding the stake.
Exactly.
Do you make an effort in your congregation to shine a light on the women?
It's actually an ethic. I mean, I have an ethic. So there's a set of assigned texts. It's called the lectionary. So every Sunday, there's a set of assigned texts. There's a Hebrew Bible. There's usually an epistle, a psalm, a gospel reading that are assigned for the day. So I have an ethic as a preacher. If there's female imagery, I use it. If there's a female in the text, I preach on her. So I actively make the choice. So the epistle a couple weeks ago, I posted a sermon, a video. My sermons are like 8 minutes. Nobody's ever complained.
Yeah.
They're very short. I just posted where Paul is talking about, we know that the creation has been groaning in labor pains, right? It's this beautiful image of labor. So that's what I preached on. I mean, you have to look for it, but there's so much there that's been so readily ignored.
Yeah.
Even spirit is a female word. So I almost always refer to the Holy Spirit as she.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one more question, and it's about accountability. both good and bad accountability. Dax has said we have some people in our lives that are very religious and they're beautiful,
Oh, they're the
wonderful.
most beautiful people in our life. They're
By far.
by leaps and bounds.
And sometimes I look at our friend and I think it is not fair that she is giving Jesus all the credit for her goodness when she is a beautiful person. And I'm sure Jesus plays a role, but all the credit's being given away, and I don't really think that's fair. And I think it happens on the tail side of the coin too, where it's like, well, this was meant to be. And, I think sometimes bad
You were
things—
molested. God wants you to forgive. We don't need to take that person to court.
And I just think this idea of accountability, and especially in the good things about you, like you should own those a little more. And
Yeah. Well, I guess I would never say like, if there's good in me, it's not me, it's Jesus. But I would say it's my experience with God's terrible mercy. So I wouldn't say it's like Jesus, this character from thousands of years ago, somehow has made me a good person. I would say I have experienced grace when I didn't deserve it so often in my life that there's something in me that shifts when that happens. So I didn't muster it up myself,
right?
That there is something spiritual to it, because I am kind of a garbage person. like left to my own devices, I'm not like this self-generating goodness machine. There has to be a lot of other things put inside in order for the goodness to come out. It's there, but in order for it to be activated, it comes out in those ways. So grace is like the thing I end up just talking about. You don't hear a lot of conversations about grace, and because it's like basically offensive. The idea that you would get something good that you didn't earn.
It's the opposite of karma. Yeah.
Totally.
It's like it's kindness in spite of someone's actions, which is like the most aspirational place you could be.
You can't earn it. I mean, that's the weird thing in our society. To get something beautiful that not only you didn't earn, but you can't earn. That's just counterintuitive to us. But I describe grace is like this freight train that delivers into my life all of the most beautiful, transformative, unearnable things.
Yeah. See, and then here's where I'm totally relating to you, because this is where like AA has given me children and all this stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like, so you think your virtue earns the right to eat a perfect peach in summer? There's nothing. That is grace. The fact that the sun comes up every day. My virtue can't pull that fucker up. There's so much grace around us.
Yeah.
And we seem completely obsessed with who's good enough, who's worthy, what are you earning? I mean, the whole debate right now about like, well, what if people are making that $600, that's more than they earn at their job. They're not going to get back to work. I'm like, the problem is they're underpaid, not the fact that they finally have a living wage.
Yeah.
It's like,
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
the last book I wrote was about sex and Christianity. I mean, it was like a complete, like, let's rework all these texts that have been weaponized against people.
Yeah.
And
that's Shameless. A sexual
it's called
reformation.
Shameless. Have you ever heard of purity rings?
Oh, this is one of my favorite things you've done. Please tell us about this.
Okay, so I interviewed people for 1.5 years and just said, hey, what message did you receive from the church about like sex and the body, gender? And then how did that message affect you? And then how have you navigated your adult life? And there were so many stories about being given a purity ring.
By your father, may I add.
Gross.
Yeah.
Daddy-daughter dances. And like, he comes with flower. Oh, it's so creepy. Ooh. Anyway, and my way of dealing with hearing all these stories was, there's a thing in Isaiah about, it's on the United Nations statue outside the United Nations that says that we will beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks, right? So it's this idea of taking that which was weaponized against us and making the choice to transform it into something that could heal us.
Yeah.
Right? And so with that in mind, I instigated this art project where I invited women to mail me their purity rings I had them melted into a sculpture of a vagina. And then I gave it to Gloria Steinem on stage at a feminist conference.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
amazing. So cool.
We read about her a lot to my daughters. So what is this stance in your church like about premarital sex?
But all that stuff about not having sex before marriage, when we were agrarian for a long time.
Yep.
Before we were industrial, post-industrial, right? And so you had to kind of know who owned what, who was going to inherit what, and there was no reliable birth control. And so in a way, you could see how they're like, you should probably keep that shit inside marriage. Just economically, it makes a lot more sense. And marriage happened about 40 minutes after puberty.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, these-
they weren't like
Right.
trying to, there wasn't 6 years of being horny and meeting people at bars and saying no.
Right, exactly. So it's just very, very different. I mean, I try and make a case in the book for part of our spiritual wellness is sexual flourishing. And what does that look like? And how do we be honest with ourselves with what that looks like? And I started seeing it as like, I mean, I don't know how to say it without it sounding kind of creepy, but like I wanted to know my parishioners, are they having good sex?
Yeah, of course.
Like, how is that not like a sort of spiritual concern? Because I was married to a very good man who would never deserve for me to say anything bad about him, because truly he's an amazing father, great man. But we had a sexless marriage.
Sure.
And we had no intimacy at all. And I know what it's like to have that part of me completely shut down, and at what cost. And that's what made me write this book, because when I got together with Eric, who I'm with now, we've been together 4 years, but we'd only been together a couple of weeks when I had to go on tour to support the UK and the German version of one of my books. So I was on the road for 3 weeks, and we just had amazing sex. And I had that dry spell for a long time. And I was like, this is so good for me.
Oh, yeah,
like,
healthy.
I felt like my heart was less shut off from other people, from the world, from myself. And all this stuff was stirring in me. And I was walking through London, and I was like, can you get on like Skype right now? And he goes, yeah. And I said, why do you feel like the church has tried to control sex for so long? And he's not Christian. And without skipping a beat, he goes, I just assumed that the church saw sex as its competition, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm writing a book.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck that. I'm writing. Like, that was the moment. So it was an interesting thing to explore. I got in some trouble.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you have bosses, right? Being officially associated with the Evangelical Lutheran Church. You have bosses, right?
I have a bishop.
Yeah. So do you ever get in trouble?
Oh, not with him. He's one of the best men I've ever known in my life. And I mean, he's known me for years before he was my bishop. And he believed in me and my voice when I was like still trying to piece together a college degree in my 30s. So he's incredible. Actually, I was doing On Being, that Krista Tippett show on NPR years ago, maybe 6 years ago. And someone's like, well, you're super independent, maybe have an issue with authority, do your own thing, right? And I go, yeah, fair enough. He goes, but you're in a system under authority, kind of like you asked, right? And I go, yeah. He goes, like, you have a bishop? And I said, yep. And he goes, just tell us how you've navigated that. And I was like, are you kidding? I'm why we have bishops. Like, somebody like me should probably have a bishop. Somebody should be looking over my shoulder and going like, is she still on the yellow brick road?
Yeah.
Or is she taking these people into a field of poppies? Also, you think there's not a lot of potential problems with an intelligent, charismatic person starting a church?
Oh,
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
gone wrong
Like-
about 90% of the time.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying this is one of the differences. Evangelicals, they don't have bishops. So if you have charisma, people are like, you have the anointing. Go and lead these people.
Buy
And
an arena.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then there's so much harm that ensues from that. So he will actually ask me, like, how's your soul? Has your ego just like destroyed you because of your career?
Yeah.
Like, how are you? Like, I'm glad I have someone looking over my shoulder. Now, his colleagues across the country were not so happy. So, yeah.
Sure.
And the American Conservative website, wrote some fake news stories about me. Feminist pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber says pornography is ethical, like a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Just because I was like, I don't think we should just keep heaping on shame that people are already, like when people feel bad about the fact that they're turned on by pornography and maybe they have a little bit of compulsive behavior about it, why in the world would you heap shame on them? That seems like the last pastoral response in the world.
It's already probably partly a response to shame.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh my God. When you take the shame part out of the equation, the compulsivity of it really lessens.
You're so right. Well, Nadia, I really, really like you. I really do hope I get to go to a meeting with you. Next time we're in Denver, I'd love to go with you in person.
Or we could go to church.
Okay, I'll go to church. I ain't scared. I've been in more church basements than...
Well, that's why people get a little upset with me when I'm speaking at church events. And I'll be like, let's be honest. There are people who are speaking honestly about their lives, connecting to God and to one another more frequently in our church basements than in our church sanctuaries. Let's just be honest.
I like that.
Also, AA isn't having committee meetings like, how can we get more members?
Right.
They're not scared of their institutional demise in the way the church is.
Well, the thing I think is just so incredible about AA is just like, how has there been a leaderless organization that has somehow thrived for 70 some years? That's the magic, in my opinion.
It's beautiful. It's because it insists on maintaining suspicion of all people.
Yeah. That's right. Well, Nadia, thanks so much for your time. And I really do want to talk to you again down the road. So next time you write a book or something, please come on here and tell us about it.
I'd love it so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It was great.
All right.
And now my favorite part of the show, the fact check with my soulmate, Monica Padman. Whenever there's a problem around Adventure Bay, Monty and her team of pups come and save the day. Monica, be there on the double. 33-year-old Monica.
Wow.
How's your birthday week going?
Good.
What was your favorite present you got so far? You don't have to say mine.
Well, I haven't gotten yours yet, so we don't have to count it.
That's true, but you looked at a picture of it.
I'm so excited for it. So you got me a treadmill.
We got you a treadmill, yeah.
And I've been really
and you can take
one.
the handles on or off, like the top part.
So it could just be flat.
It's stows. Yeah. Do you think it's cool that you can do it under a table? Isn't that neat? I never saw that anywhere. Well, I'm just more thinking about you editing and like walking on the treadmill as you edit, because you can be at a desk.
Yeah,
that's what I imagine.
I need to look at it again.
You think that's too much business to be doing, editing and...
No, I think it'd be great.
Yeah. Because you could maybe just bang out like an hour of brisk walking. You wouldn't even notice you did.
It's so cool. And I've been wanting one so bad.
Have you? I was out on a limb. You've never expressed a desire, but I thought you like to jog and sometimes it's just too hot or it's inconvenient.
I've been wanting one for a very long time.
A decade?
Probably. And I was like, there's no way I can have one in my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Where would I put it? Mm-hmm. And that's been the huge issue this whole time. And now it's fixed.
It would totally slide under your table.
It's the
That
best
would be an
case
eyesore,
scenario.
You put a rug over it under your table. I'm glancing at your table right now, imagining it.
So there are arms you can put on it.
Oh, yeah. They lay flat next to it, and then you just crank them up when you want to have some support.
It's so cool. I'm so excited. That's actually my favorite present.
It is.
Yeah, but I'm not going to tell everyone.
How about your least favorite present? We can just say the present you didn't like, that you hated, and the person who gave it to you.
Jess.
What did he give you? A fart?
He gave me hair play.
Oh, that was nice.
Well, it was the only thing I asked for. And he did give it to me, but he doesn't know how to do it. And so he just shook my head a lot.
He's never had a girlfriend with like long hair.
I still appreciate that he tried.
Yeah, he gave it a shot.
Yeah.
That was nice of him.
Speaking of, I'm afraid to tell the world
About?
in case they steal my idea, but I have a business venture that I'm going to start which is a hair play studio.
Oh, hair play studio. Yeah. I think that's genius. You've got all these immigrants in LA
Sure.
that are doing much worse jobs,
Then hair play.
i.e. the foot massages. You know, because you're dealing with people's gnarly ass feet. They let them soak in the bucket of water beforehand.
Yeah.
Maybe that's to get rid of the smell or whatever. But I got to imagine that that group of people that's currently doing foot massage would way rather do hair play.
Well, yes and no, right?
Easier on your hands.
Easier on your hands, but your head can get gross.
Some people's heads are gross. Yeah. There's scabs. There's there's vermin.
Ew!
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lice.
Okay.
Scabies.
Stop.
Okay.
You're not allowed to come to this place if you have scabies or lice.
I wonder if, like, when people got there, you could put them under what would look like one of those old-fashioned hair dryers at the hair salons. That the women would put your curlers and your permanent in there and then put that dome over their head.
Yeah.
If you could retrofit one of those with a big burst of UV light that would kill all the vermin.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah, in the scabies.
I'll bring that in as a part of it.
Okay.
And there's probably going to be hair washing as part of it too. But then it doesn't feel as good, right? Yeah,
because then you got to dry the hair quickly. Like, and a head of hair like yours, it takes a while. Like, you took a shower, I'm guessing like 2 hours ago, and your hair is soaking wet right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I have some kinks to work out, but anyway, there's going to be a hair place.
Well, a chain of them.
Exactly, like a dry bar of sorts, but just for hair play. Because so often when I'm getting a massage, I want hair play. And I'll sometimes say, can I have a little extra on my head?
Oh, uh-huh.
And they'll say, sure.
Yeah.
And then they do, but it's not what I'm looking for.
Okay.
It's not hair play.
I see a potential issue with this venture.
Okay.
Which is like, if I were to be a cocaine distributor, it'd be a bad idea because I would do all the product. I'm a little nervous that if you own this shop, you're not going to be running it as much as just receiving hair play the whole day.
Well, it's part of research and development.
Okay, so you are going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you basically are going to need to get a second person involved to run it.
I have a few people involved.
Oh, you do?
Already.
Who else is involved?
Our friend Matt, the hairstylist.
Oh, uh-huh. Sweet, sweet Matt.
So sweet.
Oh.
He's a hairstylist in LA and he's really good.
Yeah.
And we have ideas about this. And also Carly.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, can I make a suggestion? Like, one of the menu items be lice check. And it's not an actual lice check. You're not looking for lice, but those long, silly Q-tips.
Yep.
That would be great for me.
That's part of it, regardless.
Oh, so it would be like a suite of things, and among them would be the lice check.
Yeah, but I don't think we should call it lice check because that sounds off-putting. We're going to have to call it like a hair needle.
Oh, well, that's scary too. Hair
shit.
needle.
Okay.
But
hairpins.
how about leprechaun check? So it's like, sounds like something positive might come out of it.
Oh.
Unicorn check.
I don't
We're
like.
going to go through your hair looking for a unicorn,
Okay.
miniature unicorn. By the way, everyone assumes that unicorns, if they existed, would be the size of a horse. But what if they were the size of a seahorse and they lived in your hairdo?
Oh, that'd be cute.
It would.
That'd be
Hair
so
corns?
cute.
Haircorn check.
I mean, they fly around.
That's a Pegasus.
Oh, unicorns don't fly?
They don't have wings. They just have a big rod on the top of their head.
Shit.
Yeah.
So a Pegasus is a unicorn that flies.
Well, it's not a unicorn. It's a horse that flies.
So what is a unicorn that flies?
There are no flying unicorns.
Oh my God, I'm going to invent that.
Okay, great. That'll be
I have
another business.
I'm busy.
Man,
I have a lot going on.
you're in a sweet spot of creativity where like you're thinking of the things so quickly, you can't even flesh them out.
Wow.
You're like Edison.
So Nadia.
Did you check the facts? Is there a God?
Yeah, obviously, we're not going to check religious facts on this fact check.
No.
I think should go without saying.
Yeah. You know what my conclusion was? I really adore her.
Yeah.
Also, it's like every kind of religious conversation you would have, although it was a peaceful one. It's just like, she believes that. I don't believe that. No one's ever going to sway anyone. It's not the kind of thing, I don't think, that you're swayed one way or another. I imagine every armchair left this with the same opinion they had when they came in.
Maybe. I would say this. I think for some people, if you believe that religion is bad,
Oh, uh-huh.
you might not believe that anymore after you listen to this.
Right,
you might
right.
see the value of some people believing in that and the lessons and the goodness that it can bring.
Yeah.
But if you already believe that, which we do,
Yes.
well, what I do.
Yes. Yes, I already believe that. And I do think this is an area where atheists are unfair or cherry picking. Yes, some religion is terrible for people. There's many factions, the FDLS, the Mormon fundamentalists who are practicing pedophilia, that's but it's way too broad of a net. It's like saying males are dangerous. Well, many males are very dangerous and many males are not very dangerous.
Yep.
And same with religion. It just includes way too many people to make any kind of assertion about them.
Yes.
But you can point to the history of how religion has, say, slowed down science, like by imprisoning Galileo for having the audacity to suggest we revolve around the sun.
Yeah. Yeah. I think probably people's opinions on whether they believe in God are probably the same. But I do think her lessons and stories and her thoughts on religion are awesome. And I do think with atheism, my issue with atheism often is my issue with religion. It's the same issue that people are just trying to get everyone to believe what they believe. And I am totally fine with everyone believing what they want to believe.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get anyone to believe like
I know
me.
that.
Yeah.
But many atheists are. There's like a movement.
I guess, yeah. I think in response to some of the religious motivated terrorism, it seems like, oh, we got to get people off this path. Like it feels existential in those moments.
Right. I just disagree that it's the religion that's causing.
Yes.
The
And I
actual
think you
terrorism.
brought me around to your side of things.
Wow.
I think it's. I do also think it's problematic to have as a concept in a religion
Agree.
a fatwa.
Agree.
I think that's a little dangerous because
I agree.
you're relying on God's input on who should be murdered, and I don't think that should be a part of any religion. Personally,
I agree.
yeah.
I asked a few things and I just don't feel like I got any answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just part of this.
I'll add to that. There's lots of debates I love to try to win. Like it's very fun to try to maneuver and bring up a fact or this and that. And I just don't have any motivation to, quote, win a debate.
Yeah.
So it was tricky in that way where there were points where I was just like, yeah, I just like this person a lot. And I disagree with that notion that a God should tell you to murder your kid as a test of your love for the God. But then I'm going to leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there were some facts.
Okay.
And one was, so she has Graves' disease.
Yes.
She said children don't get it, but obviously they do get it because she got it.
I want to say a cousin of mine had it in their youth.
You can get it. It's just much less common in kids than adults. With this disease, the body makes antibodies that cause the thyroid gland to grow and to make too much thyroid hormone.
Hyperthyroid. Hypo's not enough and hyper's too much, right?
I think so.
I always try to remember that.
I think that's right.
By the way, you say hyperactive. Do you think you could say hypoactive? Like that would be me currently. I just sit.
Yeah, we'll say hypoactive.
I'm hypoactive currently. Oh, he's so hypoactive. People would think you were saying hyperactive.
No, because you say it like this. He's like hypoactive.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Good read. Well, can I bring up something unrelated?
Uh-huh.
I noticed that our new friend Bill Gates had a lot of comments on the post, right? And I had not read any of them because it was a busy week with the surgery and then also working all week. So I glanced at them last night. Wow, did the freaks come out for that?
What do you mean?
Oh my gosh. I am totally naive to how many. Well, this is a twofold thing. I do think at least half of them are Russian bots.
Oh, yeah.
And for people who don't know, there's a New York Times article about this. It's really important to know that Russia's goal is to sow dissent among us. They want us to fight. That's their singular goal. They don't really have a position on any topic other than they like to isolate things that are divisive and then to stoke them on social media. And so just listen, even if you're an anti-vaxxer, that's fine for you. But just know that Russia is stoking the anti-vaxxing movement. They are very much behind it. And they clearly have to be behind this QAnon thing, which I can't even comprehend this conspiracy theory. As I understand it, it's that there's this elite ring of pedophiles,
Amongst
including
celebrities,
actors,
yeah.
celebrities.
And there's like blood. Isn't there like a blood thing? Like you eat their blood or something?
Oh, okay, for youthful skin or something?
I think there's something about blood.
So there was a smattering on BG's comment section about their pizza symbols, which is like the Pizzagate. It's a QAnon thing. So you've got,
Ugh.
I don't know if it's hundreds of people or it's dozens of people with hundreds of accounts. I don't know how much is Russia, but I will say,
Wow.
if it represents an actual number of people who believe that there's a celebrity ring of pedophilia, I'm so nervous for those people. I was pretty shocked. I'm like, oh, there's some people that are really hanging on by a thread to reality.
I would say, I mean, I didn't look, so I don't know. I would say whatever the percentage is not representative.
Oh, of our listener base. You
Well,
mean?
definitely of people.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's 0.0001%.
However, I personally know a couple people who believe it.
That believe in QAnon? No.
Yeah, and they're real people.
What active imaginations they have. I'm almost jealous. Like when I imagine, like, what is it? Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have some big, mind you, both the guys are very old. They're, the notion that they're hypersexual, not hypo,
Oh.
is its own. Like, wow, you're really.
They're saying that?
Bill Gates is part of this
Ring of pedophilia.
Yeah, you get,
Oh, my God.
yeah, and their silver bullet is he was on an Epstein flight. And it's like, yeah, guess what? Thousands of people were on Epstein flights.
Yeah.
I've interacted with tons of people that certainly have crazy secrets.
Yeah.
That doesn't make me complicit in their.
No, it does not.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
It is bonkers. I'd really like to have an expert on conspiracy theorists
I would too.
because it's a psychological thing.
I have my own theory on it, and I've tracked someone close in my life who their interest in conspiracy theories ebbs and flows, right? And I've noticed that it seems to be highest when this person feels the most rejected from society or from the system that seems to be benefiting other people and not them. So I think there's a huge correlation of people who feel excluded from the system.
Yeah.
And then once they feel that way, then obviously the system must be conspiring to exclude them. My big issue with people with conspiracy theories is tell 3 people in your life a secret that you actually trust.
Yeah.
And see how long that takes before that secret gets to everyone in the group. It'll get to everyone in the group within 2 weeks. And that's people that you love and trust.
Yeah.
Now add in these conspiracies that involve thousands of people, but nobody tells anyone and no one goes to the paper. And you just can't keep secrets that well.
Yeah. I think that's a generous view of it.
I feel obligated to imagine this is someone that maybe I would have loved. I think there must be an emotion at the bottom of it that I feel bad for.
I'm sure there is. I just don't know.
And kind of like your terrorist point of view, which I think is evolved and correct, which is instead of like proving to the terrorists that they're misguided.
Totally. Yeah.
Create the environment by which they would want to choose a different life.
I totally agree.
So I don't think me telling the QAnon people that they're fucking insane will be helpful.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. That's why, I think having an expert on to explore that psychology is interesting. And I think your theory is generous. The people I'm talking about are objectively not excluded from anything. Now, they may believe they are. That's the different
tricky
thing.
There's people that are successful and yet still feel, I'm not saying they are, but they feel excluded from something.
It's also interesting, the people that I'm talking about, I enjoy very much.
Yeah.
As people. I enjoy their company so much.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to reconcile.
Yeah. I guess also what makes it a little scary is if you believe in something that crazy, I'm nervous that your behavior in response to that might be equally insane. I guess it's like if you believe in that, then I'm a little nervous about all your decision making.
Exactly. Okay, so the Jefferson Bible, I'm going to read you a little piece on this.
Oh, great.
50 years to the date after signing the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson died on July 4th, 1826, just hours before the death of his fellow signer, John Adams.
Yeah, that's a crazy, weird coincidence. If you read the John Adams McCullough book, it's really great. But those two were pretty much enemies.
Yeah.
And they had all these weird parallels. They died on the same day. They did a bunch
crazy.
of a bunch of eerie stuff.
But 6 years earlier, Jefferson completed a 84-page manuscript he called The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth, gleaned from the four Gospels of the New Testament and Jefferson's private work. It remained unknown until his great-granddaughter sold the manuscript to the Smithsonian. In 2011, the Smithsonian undertook a challenging restoration project of the fragile document in what is now known as the Jefferson Bible. It was presented to scholars and the general public at the Smithsonian Albert H. Small Documents Gallery.
Maybe I would love that version.
Maybe.
I need to read something positive about him because I've only read really negative stuff and I dislike him, despite his genius. Clearly a great writer. But yeah, a real pedophile traveling abroad with a slave, 14 or 15-year-old girl.
This is where the argument that everyone makes, including myself, and it's real, about that was a different time. That was a different time when men did this. And that was a different time when race was this, you know. And that's true. We have to let people evolve and we have to let people match up to society and not apply the standards of now to the past.
Right.
But Thomas Jefferson was a pedophile. But at that time,
13-year-olds had babies all the time.
so then is it fine?
Well, I would say that what you have to acknowledge is that in that time, he wasn't traveling through Europe and people were like, what the fuck's he doing with this 14-year-old girl? They weren't.
Exactly.
It wasn't news. And, you know, I think there's a lot of ways you have to evaluate it. One would be like, let's just say for shits and giggles, people drank mercury as a cure-all back then because they, with the best knowledge they had, that was a good idea. Well, now we would look at that and go, that's insane, that's poisonous. But it would be wrong to say that person was stupid because they weren't stupid in the day.
Yeah. So it's a tricky thing because, like, are we saying that's okay for the time? I mean, it kind of, I guess, was, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, I think it more should be like when those things are brought to light, it should be a moment to reflect how much we've evolved, and thank goodness, and how misdirected we were for a great majority of the time we've been here, as we are currently misdirected, which will be revealed later.
Yeah, agreed.
I'll tell you what's not going to reverse is how good you look in orange.
Oh my gosh.
They're never
Are
gonna,
you sure?
Yeah, in 3052, they're never going to look back and go, oh man, can you believe back then that was an okay color for her to wear? They're still going to go, great color for her.
Actually, no, because what if QAnon is real and this is the color of it?
Oh.
And then they're going to look back and say, oh, she was involved. She knew. She wore that color. She's bad.
Yeah. Well, they'd be wrong.
I guess they could still say, but she looks good in it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the pen that presidents use called an auto pen, and it's a signing machine that does the automatic signing of a signature or autograph. It says many celebrities use it, so we should look into getting one.
Well, you know, Kristen has this book, Ben and Kristen's book, The World Needs More Purple People. Part of the deal is she has to sign, I know, thousands?
Oh my God.
There's a pallet of the books in our garage.
Yeah.
And every time I see her signing it or even look at the pallet, I get filled with anxiety of how I couldn't sign my name that many thousands of times.
Yeah.
And so I thought if I ever wrote a book, I would want to negotiate that I don't have to do that. And Kristen was like, you have to because they sell them at stores, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, well, I would then need to get a stamp. Or now I'm learning there's a
auto
machine.
pen. It says they range from $2,000 to $10,000.
I'll take the $2,000 one, please.
Okay. A lot of presidents have used it.
Bush, Obama, Trump.
I'm sure Trump does not use it because he probably gets a lot of.
This is not political, but I've seen his signature.
It's pretty.
Well, it's pretty. It looks like calligraphy, but also there looks like there's way too many letters in it. For Donald J. Trump,
Oh,
when I've
really?
looked at it, it looks like there's like 35 to 60 letters in it. I'm like, what are all those letters?
Signature.
Yeah, look at it. I remember watching him sign one thing and I thought, how many names does he have? Doesn't it look
Yeah, it looks like it's odd. It's very vertical.
Yeah, and I don't know. There looks to be way too many letters in there to spell Donald J.
It
Trump.
kind of, look, I don't want to give him any praise ever.
It's a gorgeous signature.
That signature doesn't, I like it.
Yeah, it's nice. This goes back to Thomas Jefferson. You know, of course it's right to bring up the fact that he had all these indiscretions. He was also a great writer, and he helped frame something that somehow has lasted for 400 years. It's relevant to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Similarly, Trump has a beautiful signature. No two ways around it.
Okay. The Sean Hayes play is an act of God.
An act of God. That was crazy that she brought up a play I actually saw, because I've only seen, 8 or 10 in my life? Maximum.
I'd say maximum mouse. That's all.
That's all?
Yes.
Good job on the facts, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Love you.
Love you.